Hello and welcome back to another video. In the last video I showed you the details of the weather app's infrastructure and I mentioned that there is a component called the weather app assistant. In this video I will show you how this particular component works. The weather app assistant is a chatbot that is responsible for retrieving weather data based on user chat messages. It is powered by the AI system ChatGPT. First, let's take an abstract overview of what this microservice basically does. When a user sends a message to the assistant, the message will be forwarded to the AI system ChatGPT. This system will interpret the request and then send a result back to the assistant. The result contains an instruction on what function the weather app assistant should perform in order to retrieve the data wanted by the user. Based on this instruction, the weather app retrieves the data from the database and then returns it to the user. Now that's a pretty abstract overview, so let's go into the details by using a typical example of a query a user might pose to the weather app assistant. Let's say a user wants to know the weather data from yesterday. The user sends the chat message via the weather app UI. This message is then sent as an HTTP request to the main interface of the weather app assistant microservice. From there, the microservice builds up an HTTP request that will be sent to the API of ChatGPT. The request has a very specific structure. First, you define the language model that will be used by ChatGPT for this request, in our case ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. Then there will be a list of messages that we want to send to ChatGPT for this request. In our case, we will send one message with the role user. The content of this message will be the input from the user that was sent from the weather app UI. Additionally, a system message will also be sent so that ChatGPT knows the context of this request. The last part of the request is a list of functions. Here we tell ChatGPT which possible functions it could call and what variables it requires to call a function. ChatGPT will interpret the user's message and then select a possible function that could be used to resolve the intention of the message. In our example, we have one function called weather time. This function should be called if the user wants to retrieve weather data for a specific day, month or year. In the parameters, we define the properties of the function call. In our case, we would need to know the station location, the date and the aggregation type in order to receive the data from the database. Now, if we send this complete request with the model, messages and functions to the ChatGPT API, it will execute it and send an HTTP response. In this response, there is a list of so-called choices. These essentially contain the AI's response chat message. As you can see, the chat message response indicates that we should call a function named weatherTime using a list of arguments interpreted by the AI from the user chat message. In our case, it sets the station to the one specified in the function as the default, since our user chat message didn't specify a station. For the date, it sets it to the actual representation of yesterday. And for the aggregation, it sets it to day as we request the data for a specific day as indicated by the word yesterday. Now the weather app assistant can use this information to make a request to our own database using the arguments from the function call. Once it retrieves the data from the database, the weather app assistant will make another request to the ChatGPT API. This time it will include the result of the data retrieval as a chat message, specifying the role and the name of the function. Once this request is made, ChatGPT will finally respond with a user-readable message containing the answer to the initial user chat message. Finally, this chat message, together with a complete data record, will be converted and sent back to the user of the weather app UI. There are some other particularities this weather app assistant microservice has, such as caching a user's chat with an ID. This ensures that when a user continues chatting within the same session, the chat history will be preserved for further requests to the ChatGPT API. And that's pretty much it. This video marks the end of the weather app series for now. However, if you want to learn more about it, please leave a comment below or check out my GitHub repositories for the weather app. Thank you for watching.